I'm Jesse Brunner, and I'm the operator of 5th Gen Farm. As indicated by the name, I'm the 5th generation of my family to farm this acreage. My crops, I farm mostly oilseeds, cereal grains, so canola, wheat, barley, triticale, some dry peas as well. We farm about 4,000 acres. I do that mostly by myself with a little bit of help in the summer during harvest and a little help from my dad. The weeds that we've been having trouble with are prickly lettuce, downy brome, mare's tail. We're 100% no-till. We've been no-till since about 1999. That has kind of changed our weed spectrum. It has made focusing on what our problem weeds are, that's shifted over time. So on my farm, I don't really have a strict crop rotation. I try to rotate between grassy crops and broadleaf crops, trying to not follow one with the light crop year after year. Typically, I'm growing fall seeded crops after a year of fallow, and so that's when we do a lot of our weed controls during that fallow year. My weed control practices are made up of broadcast sprays when we're in crop, and then during my fallow season, I'll use the Weed It to do spot spraying as much as possible. So the Weed It spot sprayer I have it's a green on brown sprayer, so it detects virtually spots that have weeds versus spots that have nothing. It does that by exploiting the fact that chlorophyll reflects a very specific wavelength of light, and so it looks for higher amounts of that light getting reflected. When it sees that, it turns the nozzles on, you spray the weed. This is really useful during the fallow period because a lot of times I'm spraying ground that is 90% or more bare ground. There's nothing there that I need to spray. So by using the Weed It, there's some very significant herbicide reduction, and that's beneficial both from a cost perspective and from an environmental perspective. So the reason I chose the Weed It system over some of its competitors was it's definitely a system that has the most experience in our area. We have really good dealership support. There's really good support from the manufacturer as well. There's a number of different systems in this area, so I had a lot of experience with it before I purchased my own. And there are some technical advantages I feel to this system. It's been around longer, so it's a bit more refined compared to some of the new image recognition based systems. Like you can run the Weed It under all different lighting conditions, including in the dark. Price wise, I think they're all roughly in the same ballpark, but this one is just it's a more proven technology. So when I decide to use the Weed It, really kind of depends on how much weed pressure there is in the field. If I feel like I'll get away with spraying less than 50% of the field, I'll definitely use the Weed It. So when I use my Weed It, I can use it for both Burndown and spot spraying applications. I'll start off my first Burndown application of the spraying with the Weed It, and I can set it to apply a low blanket rate across the entire field, but then apply a higher rate where it detects weeds. There's not so much a huge amount of herbicide savings doing that, but I use the herbicide I have more effectively, putting it more where it's needed and less where it's not. After that first broadcast application, I can use the Weed It the whole rest of the summer, which there'll be another 2 or 3 applications. Compared to how we did things without the Weed It, you do have to spray more frequently. It's not a lot, but where I might spray 3 or 4 times throughout the summer with the Weed It, I'll have to spray an additional pass. So there is some additional cost associated with that. I sort of see it as an advantage as well, though, because with the broadcast sprayer, if you have weeds coming, you're like, oh, well, I'll wait. I'll just wait till I get more weeds, because it's going to cost me the same no matter how many weeds are out there. But with the Weed It, other than the cost just to drive the thing over the ground, you're really only paying to kill each weed, so there's not as much incentive to wait. I don't like my weeds getting very big. They're a lot easier to kill when they're 6 inches or smaller, and so if I got 6-inch weeds, I just go and get it. If I have to come back and spray it again in 3 or 4 weeks, so be it. It's not going to cost me any more herbicide than if I waited, and in fact it might cost me less because I can use lower rates because the weeds are smaller. And at that point, my savings, I'm looking at an 80% or even over a 90% reduction in herbicide used. The cost savings, you probably average out to around $10 an acre saved based what I would have done had I not had the sprayer at all. But that's kind of only half the picture. It varies year to year on how much savings you're going to have. Herbicide prices have fluctuated up and down a lot in these past couple of years. Based on current prices, I'm looking at saving $10 an acre. But if I was to use the same herbicide mixes broadcast across all my acreage, I'd probably be saving $20 to $30 an acre. For my broadcast applications early in the year, typically I'm using glyphosate, and I'll often mix in a group 4 like 2,4-D or dicamba into that. Then using my first application with the Weed It, I'll do the same thing, just using higher rates. When I get later into the summer, starting middle of June and July, I'll switch from glyphosate and group 4s to paraquat and other herbicides such as bromoxynil or some of the group 14 herbicides. That way my goal is to put as many different modes of action on that ground during the summer as I can to fight herbicide resistance. And so like my second applications will be using 3 different modes of action that are completely different than what I started off earlier in the summer with. I use herbicide mixes that are mixing more modes of action or higher rates, and so I end up with weeds that are more dead than what you would get using a broadcast sprayer. We have a big challenge with prickly lettuce. That weed, it likes to give you what we call a courtesy wilt. It'll kind of look dead, but it'll be kind of not dead and just kind of hang out there for weeks. With the Weed It though, I can use herbicide mixes that are aggressive enough that it kills that weed completely dead quickly. And then this helps us prevent herbicide resistance, which is a really big concern on my farm. And that's probably the biggest benefit to the Weed It for me over these years, is I'm allowed to get a better job controlling my weeds while saving money at the same time. So to operate a Weed It, it really is no different than any other sprayer. The system can be retrofit to most sprayers. I have mine on a wheel boom sprayer, which I previously used it on a suspended boom sprayer. I think if your ground's really flat, a suspended boom sprayer would work fine, but in my rolling terrain, a wheel boom sprayer works much better. It's really, really important to maintain a constant ground height for the sensors to operate properly. And unlike with the broadcast sprayer, when you only have one nozzle coming on, the height of your nozzle will dictate the applied rate onto the ground. So maintaining a constant ground height is very important. As far as what it takes to pull the machine, it's no different than any other sprayer. I pull mine with a 250 horsepower wheel tractor. It's an 80-foot sprayer with a 1,500-gallon tank. If you had a smaller sprayer, you can pull the smaller tractor, or you can put on a self-propelled sprayer and do that too. I know my cost for operation, it cost me about $2.75 to $3 an acre just to run the machine over the ground. And that's depreciation on my tractor, labor costs, fuel costs, maintenance, all that wrapped up. Works out to that roughly $2.75 to $3 an acre. So with the Weed It, once you pay for the system, there is no additional cost to operate it. I know there are other systems out there, particularly green on green systems, that you have to pay a per acre usage fee to run those, and the Weed It isn't like that. Once you own the machine, it's yours and you can run as many acres as you want. So Weed It sprayers are by no means a cheap technology. I paid about $1,400 per foot to build my sprayer. So in the case of my sprayer, it's an 80-foot sprayer, so it was about $115,000 for the Weed It, which I ironically stuck on a $10,000 used sprayer, which I bought specifically for putting the Weed It on. As far as how long it's going to take you to recoup that cost, it just depends on how many acres you're able to run over. If you conservatively figure you're going to save $10 an acre, you can do the math from there. And that's $10 per year, not per application, depending on what you're doing. You can figure out from there how many acres you're going to need and what length of time to get your money back. There are government programs to help. CSP has enhancements that specifically mention spot sprayers. And for me, that pretty much covered the cost of my machine. So if that's something you're willing to do, that's a good way to help offset the cost. So on the Weed It display, this shows my sectional control. So I can turn on and off each sensor individually. So that gives me 24 sections of control on my 80-foot boom. And then I can adjust presets, like this is the sensitivity for how small a weed it'll detect. And this will detect weeds down about the size of your fingernail, so it does pretty good. Then I can set the margin, which is how far ahead of and behind each weed it'll spray. And you adjust that based to the size of the weeds and your environmental conditions. If it's windy, you'd want to increase that. Typically I'm running that somewhere between 6 to 8 inches of overlap ahead of and behind the weed. That's pretty much it. It automatically adjusts for speed, and it automatically adjusts for turn compensation. So every time the sensor detects a weed, you can see one of those little blue triangles. Each one of those represents one sensor, so it's detecting a weed. I've really enjoyed having my weed. It's probably one of the most interesting pieces of technology on my farm right now. It's definitely my favorite toy. You know, as far as whether it would be right for somebody else, I think it really comes down to your acreage. If you have enough acreage to justify the initial investment, I really think it's a no-brainer. The advantages it gives you, both in terms of cost savings and herbicide resistance management, which is a little more difficult to put a number to, but over time, I think it's just going to be a requirement to stay competitive for growers in this area.